I named this self-compassion as a superpower to recovery because my understanding of self-compassion is that, and my experience, not only understanding on the head level, but understanding of self-compassion is that it has actually been one of the key elements to change my recovery from this pushing and forcing to something that is very kind of small and compressed to something that is more wide and open. And this is why self-compassion is one of the main topics that I like talking about and teaching about to people in recovery, because we've had our share of suffering throughout life. But I thought that, we could start with this little invitation just to take a few breaths together. So wherever you are there, if you want, you can close your eyes, but you can also leave your eyes open if that is more comfortable for you. And just tuning in for a few breaths to your body, noticing your body, noticing the weight of your body against the chair, maybe noticing your feet on the floor. And just noticing your body moving when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out. When you're breathing in, noticing that you're breathing in. And when you're breathing out, noticing that you're breathing out. And then I invite you to drop into your consciousness a word, welcome. 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 And just allowing that word go through the whole body, go through your whole experience, and perhaps noticing what happens in your body as you're welcoming yourself to this moment and this moment and this moment. Welcome. And whenever you feel that you're complete, you can start moving your body, moving your fingers, moving your toes. Maybe you want to roll your shoulders. Maybe you want to stretch. Just see what kind of movement does your body need right now. Just watch your neighbors if you want to stretch. And my experience is that one of the things in recovery that we are learning to do is learning what we need on each moment. What does our body need? And seeing what movement your body needs right now might be one way of tuning in with that. Okay, so Vimalasara told a lot of things about me, so I'm just going to go through this shortly. So 21 years I've been in recovery, and I came to recovery through gateway of alcoholism and 12-step groups. And 7 years sober, I realized I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And by that, I thought that I'm this model student of 12 steps. But then I realized that actually there are multiple addictions in my life, and I'm still being this victim. And I found meditation, I found mindfulness, and that's when my recovery really started to go deeper. So I'm doing all this Buddhist recovery and Buddhist practice. And then I attend Gabor Mate's compassionate inquiry training. I've done the year long and going to the mentorship soon. So I know that there are some in there who are familiar with this program, but this is kind of like my Buddhism and Buddhist style CV, you could say. For me, compassionate inquiry is avoiding this spiritual bypass. So it's very important to work with my deep tendencies. And those of you who don't know, it's a psychotherapeutic approach and has to do with the trauma. Okay, so these are some basic things. Most of you know this, and I just thought that I will bring in some ideas, because I also know that there are some newcomers in there who are new to Buddhist recovery. So I'm just going to tell a few points that I think that are important, and then there's going to be group sessions, and then at the end, depending how much time we have, I have 2 different meditations from which we choose either one. So like the definition of compassion that I myself find the most easiest to understand is that when kindness meets suffering. So in my case, when coming here, waiting for this event to happen, being in the board for 3 years for Buddhist Recovery Network, and really expecting, and then finding out that I have COVID, there was a lot of suffering. So my natural tendency is to have this very critical mind, and it's like, how could you be so stupid? That, why didn't you? I mean, I did everything the best I could, but still there's this kind of like this very nasty sound in my head who wants to push me down and bring me a lot of shame. So that is a good way to start practicing self-compassion, because compassion is when kindness meets suffering. So whenever there needs to be the sense of suffering. And compassion is, of course, one of the big 4. I call it the big 4, the 4 Brahma Viharas. So there's metta, loving kindness, then there's compassion, that is karuna, and then there's mudita, that is the joy for others. Sorry, English is not my first language, so I'm sometimes a little bit struggling with the words. And then there's upekha, that is the equanimity. So it's one of the big 4 sublime mental states that we have in Buddhism. And then there's this teaching of the 2 arrows. So this is what I'm talking about, the natural tendency. So it might be something that gum gets stuck to your shoe, or it's something actually like what happened to me with the COVID test. So that's our natural tendency, that whenever there is something painful happening in our life, we start creating extra suffering. So there's the first arrow that hurts, and then we start shooting to ourselves this second arrow, maybe third or fourth. So we start creating extra suffering in our lives, being very nasty to ourselves, or trying to push away the pain. And this is called the secondary suffering, what we create in our lives. So then a few words about Vedana, that is this tendency, like in people, like very automatic, that we would like to push away everything that is unpleasant. We don't want to touch it. We would like to get more and more pleasant. And I've learned that, with people in recovery, at least for me, when things start getting neutral, when there's nothing much happening, I label it easily as boring, and I would like to get something, just to neutral for me is also very difficult to take. And this pushing away the unpleasant is the way actually that doesn't lead us to recovery, or just running away so everything that is pleasant. So, but it's good to be aware of this Vedana process as well when we talk about self-compassion. Because the secret is the biggest source of suffering is when we try to avoid the suffering. And there's this saying, I don't know who actually said it first. I think it comes from the Jungian, thoughts, but it goes something like this, that everything that we try to avoid goes to the basement of our brain or mind to lift weights. So as much as we try to push something away, it might be the feeling of anger, or it might be our cravings, or it might be the sadness. When we push it away, it actually starts to control us from underneath. And there is right away this sense of shame that is bound to it. That's I've also noticed, that we are not allowing ourselves to feel certain feelings because they're so embarrassing. They show our vulnerability to other people and to ourselves. But then, when we come to recovery, for me, recovery is that we are working against our habitual tendencies. So all of these that I just, for example, the stuff that I explained, we are starting to work against it. And the attitude is of curiosity and kindness. So it's kind of like we go on this exploration of what is actually happening in our experience. And if we can have this kind of attitude of curiosity, it automatically starts to open up. It automatically starts to bring this kind of like more positive vibe to it. And when you think about the word recover, Gabor Mate talks about this a lot. The recover is to find something that is covered. So that is many times we think like, for example, in the metta practice or compassion practice or self-compassion practice, that we have to practice something that we really do have to do and get this right, or, something like this. But actually, it's about opening. It's about opening our vulnerability. It's about opening with curiosity. It's about opening with kindness. And I don't know if the English word is right, dismantling, or just, moving the layers, all of those habitual tendencies, all that has to do with addiction, these patterns. And then there's something that rises. And for me, that's something that rises. It has to do with the 4 Brahma Viharas. So it's not always that you have to really do stuff, but maybe be, and just, letting things open up and unfold. So the Buddhist idea of practice is, of course, that we start with ourselves. Like in the Metta Bhavana practice, you start with yourself, and then you go to a good friend, and etc., and all the way to all sentient beings. And then when you're practicing these Brahma Viharas, you're letting them to radiate and you're letting them to spread, but you always start with ourselves. But of course, we know that, especially those of us in recovery, it's sometimes easier to feel compassion towards others than to ourselves. And that's okay as well. So what does self-compassion mean? It means it's kindness towards ourselves in the moment of suffering. So whenever there's suffering, you step into a gum, or there is something that gets you off balance. In that moment, are you able to meet yourself with this attitude of curiosity and kindness? And how do we do self-compassion? Or how do we practice it? Or how do we work against the natural tendency of us? For example, if you miss a bus, I don't know for you, but my first reaction is that, why were you so stupid? Why didn't you start earlier? And, stuff like this. So it can be that kind of moment. So what would you say to a good friend in that kind of situation? Would you tell them the same way that they're stupid and useless and etc. Or would you say to them that that's okay, it's okay, I know that this hurts, there's suffering here, but you can always take the next bus, or I'm here for you for this suffering. Just noticing that there is suffering is a kind act towards ourselves. And what are the words that you would use or say to a good friend in a situation when they're suffering and you want to make them well, not to make them feel better, but you want to comfort them, you want to validate their feeling. So yeah, it's okay, I'm here for you. Ouch, this hurts. Or people sometimes like to use touch. For me, it's quite automatic nowadays that I put hand on my chest here, or the heart center, or put my hand on the belly and start rubbing my belly. Or somebody likes to, maybe you can, when you're sitting there, you might test, some of this, because it's not, for me, it was first like, I don't want to do that. It sounds like very yucky, or, maybe giving yourself a hug. So touch is very, very, it starts processes in our body. I'm not going to go to the physiological processes, but it actually starts processes in our body, the vagus nerve and stuff like that. So is there some way that you can show yourself by touch that you really care? Or this is very funny. I want to tell you this experience. There was a workshop with Gabor Mate and Kristin Neff, who is Kristin Neff is one of the world leading self-compassion researchers, and then Gabor said that yeah, all this touching and words, I find it like, ew, I don't want to do that. Is there any way that I can show compassion towards myself except for this, And then Kristin said that it can be anything that is kind for yourself. So for example, in the beginning, in the meditation, when we were doing the movement, it can be some kind of movement. Some people like to do it, for example, this is very comforting for our nervous system to go back and forth or side to side. Or it can be drinking a glass of water, or going for a walk, or petting your dog, or listening to good music, whatever works for you. But I think that, it's for us in recovery, it's super important to have these thoughts kind of like, or these things like thought out before the tricky situation comes, because usually the situations when they come so suddenly, and they swipe us off our feet, so it might be very difficult to think in that moment, like, what would I do now? But so you can actually like make a list. This is my kind actions towards myself list in case of suffering. And I'm sure that there is all sorts of suffering that we meet throughout the day. And Kristin Neff, I mentioned earlier, she makes these or differentiates these three parts in self-compassion, which I find very useful. So first of all, there's mindfulness. There's the realization that there's actually suffering in here. And then there's the common humanity. And this is very important, and especially in people in recovery, because many times when we're feeling these difficult emotions, we are so ashamed because we think that it's a mistake, that we are wrong kind, or we are not good enough, or we are too much or too little, or whatever. I have also ADHD, so I had my share of this, unhealthy or, these unskillful beliefs. So that actually suffering and difficult emotions, they're part of humanity. It's part of being human, because we have this human body, we are going to suffer. And also these difficult feelings are part of being human. So this is what it feels to suffer. This is what sadness feels like. And there's immediately kind of like this shift from being the emotion, also with the mindfulness, when you notice the emotions in the body, that you shift from being the feeling, being an outsider, and the difficult emotion starts to dismantle when feeling it. So, and then there's the kindness that I told about, this touch, this words, this all different kinds of actions that you can do to alleviate your suffering. And I wanted to show you this, because this has really been a game changer for me in self-compassion. This is picture from Kristin Neff, and the way she's explaining this self-compassion has to do with these two bears. So first there's this tender self-compassion where we are learning to accept ourselves, to alleviate the suffering. You can find this picture online, so you don't have to remember this or worry that you won't see this after this. So there's this tender side, like a mama bear for the little cub, holding the bear. We can hold ourselves, we can comfort ourselves, but then also, and this is super important, there's this fierce self-compassion when we're taking the action to alleviate suffering, like the mama bear is trying to keep the small one safe. And this has to do with some other, recovery super skills, that is drawing boundaries, being able to say no, and then providing, saying yes. So telling people and noticing, first of all, starting to notice what is it that we need at each moment, because our addictive behaviors are bound to the needs. We try to fill certain needs by our addictive behaviors. And now that we start learning how to state needs, I need to be heard, I need some food, I need some sleep, saying your needs. So learning to say yes and no is very important in self-compassion as well. So it's not all of this like pink clouds and being kind, but also kind of like fierce action. And for me, as a fierce person, sometimes fierce action is very important. And I asked a question in that workshop from Kristin Neff for people in recovery, that what would she emphasize, and what would she say about the inner critical voice. And she said that because many times when I talk in recovery about self-compassion, I'm told that you're just trying to pet people, they are not, you're not going to get them sober, they just need to get their ass to the bench and sit there until the program goes through their head, through their bum, or something like this. But anyway, and Kristin said that, okay, you can have this inner critical voice as a driver, but you have to accept that with that comes always the shame, the anger, all these negative emotions. But that's why self-compassion is so useful, because there is no that talk. I mean, and it also includes this fierce part. Other thing that she said, it's many times, especially those of us who have stuff with codependency, or identify as women, that we have been kind of like trained by the society to be kind and not to talk about our needs. So for some people in recovery, the starting point is to start with the fears, to start with the boundaries. And then when the boundaries are set, it's safe enough to go inside to the vulnerability and state our needs. So no spiritual bypass. This is because that's what some people say to me, that it's self-compassion, it's you don't establish things like that. But actually it is not a good vibes only type of idea. I mean, it's quite the opposite. I think that self-compassion is so radical, because we are actually allowing ourselves to sit with the suffering and notice what we need, and starting to establish our boundaries. I mean, what could be more radical in recovery? And these difficult emotions, they are nowadays so easy to avoid. I mean, you just have to pick up your phone and go to TikTok, and poof, it's gone. So actually sitting with the difficult, yes. Okay, so I thought that now I've spoken half an hour. So I was thinking that I would give you 15 minutes to go in groups of 3 or 4. And I put here 3 questions, so they're quite open. You don't have to go in this order, or I thought that, you would have about 5 minutes each. So if you have 3, but of course, if you have 4, then you have less. So if this idea is new for you, how does the idea of self-compassion resonate with you? What is your kind of like the first, and it's okay if it's resistance. I mean, that's how things are sometimes. And do you have any experience of how self-compassion has helped you in your recovery? So, because I know that all of you have already done a lot of things that have to do with self-compassion, but you haven't actually kind of like named it. But yeah, so is there's anything that you can notice that, oh, in that place I was kinder to myself, and that actually, you know, start to work. So anyways, you could have the use of self-compassion more intentional in your recovery. So maybe doing a self-compassion meditation every now and then. You can find them in Insight Timer and for example, online, you know, a lot. I'm going to tell you a couple of resources later. So yeah, so this is my idea. And maybe since I'm not there, somebody's going to help me to facilitate this.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you very vaguely.
Okay, so let's have.
Oh, I can hear. Vimalasara, I can hear.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 in that room and go into threes. 5 groups of 3. And then so that we can spread out. And we'll bring in the questions for you. And then let's us kind of go into groups of 3s, move over to that side.